Since bursting onto the scene in 2002, EA's Battlefield franchise continues to reinvent the massive multiplayer shooter. With the release of Battlefield 5, IGN has decided to clear the smoke and rank the top 10 games in the Battlefield series. To populate our list, we're only considering core games in the series, not expansions or DLC. And although our review scores for each game are taken into consideration, we're ranking based on overall quality, cultural impact, and lasting impressions. With that said, here's our list for the top 10 Battlefield games of all time. EA DICE went out on a limb with Battlefield Hardline. Its vastly different subject matter shifted from large-scale military campaigns to domestic law enforcement, but did surprisingly little to change the gameplay in a meaningful way. Its introduction of a cops and robbers motif set in the streets of LA made room for a new take on the traditional conquest game mode called Hotwire with moving capture points. This slight alteration wasn't quite enough to draw the majority of the player base away from the relatively recent Battlefield 4.
Haven't they got guys specially trained for that?
Longtime Battlefield fans will remember Bad Company as the console one due to its limited PS3 and Xbox 360 release. But the inclusion of now staple multiplayer mechanics like destructible environments and a new game mode called Rush helped pave the way for the Battlefield we know and love today. Bad Company also employed DICE's all-new Frostbite engine, which significantly improved the overall look of the series. And in the first for the franchise, Bad Company brought us a single-player campaign which stood out thanks to its comedic undertones.
What? I just always wanted to say that.
The second installment in the then-budding franchise, Battlefield Vietnam, would reinforce the series' wide appeal. Vietnam was the first game to introduce helicopters, and although the controls had a steep learning curve to new players, they felt second nature when mastered. Now toss in some 60s rock anthems and a map inspired by Apocalypse Now's famous The Ride of the Valkyrie scene, and you've got a bona fide hit. It's easy to look at 2142 as nothing more than a reskin of Battlefield 2, but it's got a lot more going for it than that. Virtually all of 2142's merits are a result of its Titan mode, which pits two massive and futuristic floating fortresses against one another. Capture points spew out missiles bombarding the enemy ship until it can be boarded, at which point the entire server's population rushed into the cramped confines of the Titan. The variety this mode offers is unequaled even by today's standards. And there was arguably nothing better in the entire Battlefield series than planting a bomb on an enemy Titan before jumping off as it detonated high above the battlefield. EA DICE surprised most of us by turning back the clock to World War I, something few other AAA shooters have even attempted to tackle, and the results were brilliant. Battlefield 1 ramped up the chaos to new levels with cavalry units, elite classes, and massive lumbering behemoths to bring down. The era's vehicles interacted well with infantry as slow-fixed turret tanks were easy to avoid, and biplanes could be brought down with almost any weapon. While multiplayer shined with this newfound chaos, Battlefield 1's single-player campaign took a more sentimental route, telling personal stories through brief but touching vignettes. While Battlefield 1 had its share of problems, like behemoth balancing and random spray recoil, it got much more right than it got wrong.
Next objective done.
The hype surrounding Battlefield 3's Caspian Border gameplay trailer back in 2011 was real, and Battlefield 3 delivered on that promise of sprawling, modern military warfare. The ecosystem became more dynamic with additions like suppressive fire, a number of new upgrades for classes and vehicles, and a major gadget revamp. Linear maps such as Operation Metro showed us just how immersively chaotic a Battlefield game could be, with rich town design filled with profanity and thudding explosions. Its mediocre single-player campaign aside, no other game would deliver a warfare experience as impactful as Battlefield 3. Though its predecessor left PC players hanging, Bad Company 2 brought all the series' innovations like destructible environments back home to the PC. The class identity was completely revamped as well, giving the assault class ammo pouches and medkits to the LMG-wielding support class. The ability to revive teammates finally came back from the Battlefield 2 days, and getting rid of the lay-down prone mechanic allowed for PC players to focus more on shooting than dolphin diving. Environmental destruction was brought to new heights with the ability to completely level entire buildings. Meaningful teamwork was required to bring down vehicles like the Apache attack helicopter. And while most of us consider Bad Company 2's aircraft overpowered, finally taking down a dominant Apache pilot was one hell of an experience. Plagued with bugs and glitches from launch, and with a single-player campaign that seemed more like an afterthought, Battlefield 4 got off to a bad start. Fortunately, with time, it's become one of the most active and well-polished Battlefield games to date. This miraculous transition set the precedent for what we expect from post-launch support. DICE's current Frostbite 3 engine was unveiled with Battlefield 4, and its visual achievements really shine through the game's map-altering transitions called Levolutions. Console players finally got to partake in 64-player servers and for the first time experienced Battlefield the way it was meant to be played. Add in snappier, fine-tuned gameplay, the return of Commander mode, and a wonderful assortment of vehicles, and you've got the complete Battlefield experience. Battlefield 1942 is the epitome of the phrase ahead of its time. Looking back, it's still hard to believe that in 2002, 64 players were going head-to-head in a class-based AAA online shooter and taking control of tanks and planes along the way. Who can ever forget unscripted, movie-like moments like massive airplane dogfights in the Battle of Britain, or feeling like part of the 101st Airborne parachuting in Operation Market Garden? This is where it all started. While the shooting doesn't hold up by today's high standards, 1942 still has plenty of lessons left to teach when it comes to map and vehicle variety. Battlefield 2 takes our spot as the #1 game of the series. How could it not? Battlefield 2 brought us to the modern combat era and introduced critical gameplay mechanics that would live on in every game in the series. Squads, for instance, allowed for up to 6 players to stick together in massive maps, and medics could now revive slain teammates, deepening the need for player cooperation. Battlefield 2 placed a greater emphasis on punchier gunplay action, for the time anyway. Sprinting became available to all players, commanders were introduced for the first time, and we got our first glimpse at a progression system that would reward you with new weapon unlocks and merit badges. Battlefield 2's maps were diverse, ranging from urban close-quarters combat and strike at Karkand to sprawling vehicular campaigns like Dragon Valley. While Battlefield 1942 may have laid the groundwork, Battlefield 2 refined the formula in ways that are now synonymous with the franchise. What's your favorite game in the series? Let us know in the comments, and for all things video games and Battlefield, keep it right here at IGN.